Bhima, you can start.
Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Let us start the session with prayer. Om Sadashiva Samarambham Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Padyante Guru-Parampara.
Bhima ji, please unmute yourself. I think it's.
Namaste to all. So today we are on the 4th day of the 3rd Global Festival of Oneness. We are all celebrating a Shankara Jayanti as a Shankara Utsava in a way of 1 month program. So in this program, several speakers have been giving talks on Shankara's philosophy and his works. So a warm welcome to everyone at this event. And we have an honorable guest, Swami Tyagananda ji, for today's talk. I also welcome him to this program. He is going to speak on a very interesting topic, which is what is really real. So Swami Tyagananda ji joined the Ramakrishna order at the monastery in Mumbai in 1976 after graduating from the University of Mumbai. He received spiritual instruction, means mantra diksha, from Holy Mother's disciple Swami Vireshwarananda, and his monastic vows, means sannyasa diksha, from Swami Gambhirananda. And Swamiji served in the monasteries at various places, at Belur Math from 1980 to 1982, at New Delhi from 1982 to 1983, and at Chennai from 1983 to 1997. And he was sent to Boston in 1998 to assist Swami Sarvagatananda. He is the Hindu chaplain at Harvard and MIT since 1999. After Sarvagatananda's retirement in 2002, he was appointed as a head of the Vedanta Society in Boston. Tyagananda was editor of the English journal Vedanta Kesari for 11 years from 1986 to 1997. And he has written, translated, and edited 14 books. He writes a fortnightly blog, and his talks are available as an audio podcast. He has presented papers at academic conferences, and he gives lectures and takes classes on invitation at the Vedanta Society, as well as MIT, Harvard, and other colleges and religious groups in North America. So now I request him to shed a light on this topic, what is really real. Thanks.
Om Asatoma Satkamaya Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya Aviravir Maheti Rudrayate Dakshinam Mukham Te Namam Pahi Nityam. May the divine lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. May the divine consciousness fill our hearts and protect us. Peace, peace, peace. I'm very happy to be a part of this Global Festival of Oneness organized by Indica Moksha. I think it's a great initiative, and it's an honor and privilege to be a part of this. Oneness is such a important, not just an idea, but the reality of our very existence. In some strange sort of way, while the world has come very close due to technology. Well, because of technology now, that all of us are able to sit at home and from the comforts of our own home are able to watch this program, even though sometimes the speakers could be hundreds and thousands of miles away. So in some sense, we have already all come together and are able to experience or feel that sense of unity. At the same time, we also know that the world in which we live is very fractured, is very divided. We already know there are several conflicts going on in different parts of the world. The one which is making most headlines nowadays is the war in Ukraine and Russia, but also the situation in Sri Lanka and of course, Afghanistan and many other parts of the world. So we live in a very difficult time. There is this ideal of oneness on one hand, and the reality of these divisions, diversity, and fractured world on the other. The beauty is that in spite of everything making us feel that the world is divided, the ideal of oneness and the ideal of universality always remains uppermost in the minds of most right-thinking people. And a credit for that, making that oneness and universality such a central theme, central and noble ideal for right-thinking humanity, much of it goes directly or indirectly to Bhagavadpada, Sri Shankara. So I would like to share with you today a few thoughts on what is really real. The idea of reality is so central in Advaitic thinking. Now, in our day-to-day life, we don't really go about asking what is real. That's not a kind of a question that comes up naturally or often in our mind. And yet, there are situations in life when we are forced to ask the question, is it real? One example clearly, of course, is our experience of dreams. We know that we dream. Most of us dream every night. Not all of us remember every dream the next morning, but we do. And of course, oftentimes we do remember at least parts of our dreams. Now, while we are dreaming, everything appears very real. But when we wake up in the morning, we just dismiss it and say, oh, that was just a dream. And then we come then to what we call as the real world. So that's one experience where we're kind of dealing with two competing realities. The reality of the waking world and what seemed real just a few moments or a few minutes ago in the dream. The second time we might ask the question about what is real, when we have an experience which is very powerful or which is very sudden, with generating, say, joy, surprise, or fear. What comes to mind is, for instance, if someone just wins a lottery and says, oh, you have suddenly become winning of crores of rupees. And then one is so shocked, some is stunned, say, am I dreaming? Is this real? Or when there is a terrorist attack, or let's say there's an earthquake and one's place of business or home or workplace suddenly is destroyed totally. At such times, one pauses and asks, is this real? What's happening right now? Is this real? At the third time, when we ask that question, this probably might be a little bit more common, is when we go to see a magician doing their tricks. Again, sometimes they may produce something, a sleight of hand in their hand. You might see a flower or a bird, and then do some mumbo jumbo on it, and then it vanishes. And when it vanishes, you say, I just saw it, and where did it go? Was that real? So, although we may not ask the question, what is real every day, there are certainly situations in our life where this question does come up. And of course, those who are students of philosophy or those who are earnest spiritual seekers, they have to ask that question. Because even when people who are bhaktas or devotees, they say, I have faith in God. God exists. God is real. So what is the meaning of that statement? God is real. We look around the world appears real too. So what is the relationship between the reality of God and the reality of the world? Now, one of the things that we see that never makes us ask the question, what is real, is because we already have made an assumption that if there is something I can see, something I can touch, something I can smell, anything that is an object of my perception, anything that my senses can grasp in some form or some way, then that must be real. That's the kind of an unquestioned assumptions that most people make. But the example of the dream that I gave in the beginning really casts doubt on that assumption, that just because I see something doesn't necessarily mean that it is real. Just because something feels as if it's real doesn't necessarily mean it's real. And I think that's one major point of divergence between what we say the modern material sciences and what Vedanta might say. A lot of times people say, how can you deny the world? I'm seeing the world. So it's real because I see it. And in Shankaracharya's commentaries, in Adi Shankara's commentaries, you see that him saying that the reality of the world can be questioned because we see it. The world, Jagat Mithya, Kutaha, Drishyatvat, because I'm able to see it. So same reasoning is given. Vedanta gives the same reasoning to show that this can be questioned. And material science gives the same reason to show that it's beyond question. So we might say that in order for something to be real, it must fulfill at least three conditions. One is that whatever is real should not contradict my experience. Second, it should be normal, whatever our understanding of normal is. And the third is it should have a lasting value. It shouldn't just disappear. Now, dreams and all the other examples I gave before, none of them fulfill this. Because yes, the dream appears real as long as we are dreaming, but it just vanishes, doesn't last. Also, it's not normal. I might be just sleeping in my bed, but in my dream, I could be at Taj Mahal, or I could be in Kashmir, while I may be just sleeping in my bed in Chennai. So it's not a normal experience. And that is why we say dreams are not real. Now, when we say dreams are not real, that observation is made from the waking standpoint, because we say that every night we have a different dream, but every morning when we wake up, we don't see a different world. The world seems to continue. The world seems to have a persistence that dreams don't have. The problem with that kind of thinking is that when I'm watching the dream, I don't really think, oh, this is a new dream. This is a dream different from the one that I saw yesterday. When I'm in the dream world, watching the dream, it appears like the normal world, just as what is happening now appears to be. For all we know, right now, this could be a dream as well. But we won't know that it's a dream unless and until we wake up from it. And this idea, this questioning the reality of the world, we find that this occurs in the right thinking people everywhere in the world. In Plato's writings, long before there was any at least known contact with Eastern thought, in Plato's writings, you see him, he puts it in a negative way. What he says is there is no way to conclusively prove that I'm not dreaming at this very moment. So it's not something merely scriptural. It's just purely through reasoning, through rational approach to our experience in life. We can question the existence and the reality of the world. We cannot really prove that the world is not real. That's really not possible. What we can do is we can raise credible doubts about the reality of the world. What we can conclusively say anything about is about our own self. So although oftentimes in non-dualistic circles, it's very common to speak about Brahma Satyam Jagan Mithya. And that's fine. And we all understand what that means. But it's important to know that in Advaitic thought, they do not spend much time with the world. It's not worth spending much time about the objective world. So the phrase that sometimes gets used, the adjective that sometimes gets used is the worldly tucha. Tucha means don't waste your time. And why do they say don't waste your time? Is because you cannot conclusively say that the world is real or unreal. So what we do is we go to the certifying authority which says anything about the world. Who is the one who is experiencing the world? Me. I'm the one who is experiencing the world. So that is why the inquiry, rather than going out questioning the existence of the objective, the existence of objects, it really goes back to the subjective. Who is this person who is experiencing the world? Is this person real? Because me, who I'm experiencing the world, if I'm shown to be unreal in some way, then the world, we don't even have to worry about the reality of the world. And so the effort is to find the status of this I, the me. So when we say the dreams are unreal, that is from the waking standpoint. But if we now look at it from the dream standpoint, the world is not, the world that in the waking state is not very different from the world in the dream state. In fact, there is no difference at all. If dreams begin when we go to sleep and end when we wake up, this world, the world in which we are all now at present, it starts when we wake up and it ends when we go to sleep. Now, does the world end when it goes to sleep? Now, we might say that, no, the world does go on. I may be asleep, but the world is going on all right, because my friend was not asleep and my friend saw the world. Now, the problem with that kind of thinking is, oftentimes we say that seeing is believing. How can I depend on the testimony of someone else when the existence of that someone else itself is in doubt? And therefore, there is a what the commentators often say, Adnyata Satta. Adnyata Satta means, does something exist when I'm not aware of it? Am I aware of the world because it exists, or the world exists because I'm aware of it? So there are these two schools of thought. Sometimes in Sanskrit, they call them Drishti Srishti Vada and Srishti Drishti Vada. We won't go into the technicalities of it, but it's enough to know that when we look at the world, the waking world, from a dream standpoint, we see that the dream experience and the waking experience are not different at all. And therefore, it's possible to question the existence of the waking state as much as we can question the existence of the dream state. Therefore, the Aitareya Upanishad says, Tatra Traya Swapnaha, there are three kinds of dreams. Now, normally we begin by saying the three states are waking, dream, and deep sleep. But to an adhikari, a student who has become fit for higher learning, the teacher gives the next lesson. Our first lesson might be, yes, there are three states, waking, dream, and deep sleep. But once we have grasped that idea and want something higher, something deeper, then the teacher says, there are really three dreams. And that is the waking dream, the dream, and the deep sleep dream. Their dream is defined as ayathartha darshanam, seeing things not correctly, seeing what is not there. And that is true with regard to all the three states. And that is why they speak about all of the three states being different kinds of dreams. Swami Vivekananda, one of the great expounders of Vedanta, who continued the Shankara tradition in the times in which we live, he extends this idea it's so powerful. So just as there are these three dreams, speaking waking dream, dream, and deep sleep dream, Swamiji says we can see our entire existence as a series of dreams. So when a person dies, that's a death dream. If you go to Swarga or Naraka, heaven or hell, that could be a heaven dream, a hell dream. You're born again, that could be a Punarjanma dream. So endless series of dreams. And we know that dreams end only when we wake up. If we don't wake up, we're just going to move from one dream to the next. So studying these three texts, what we see is that none of them last forever. They all keep on changing. And so one of the observations made in non-dualistic thinking is that Satya equals Nitya. That which is real is eternal. In other words, there is no such thing as a temporary reality. Or this is real only for 5 minutes, or real only for a day. I mean, you can use the word real, but it's very provisional in the sense that, well, it's not really real. Or whatever is really real will always remain, will never disappear. If the world were real, it would always remain. But we know it disappears when I go to sleep. If the dream were real, it would always remain. It disappears when I wake up. Everything disappears sooner or later. Now, how do I even know that it disappears? I wouldn't know that it disappears if I were not aware of it. I'm able to experience my waking state because I'm aware of it. Without awareness, there is no knowledge. And so I experience the waking state because of awareness. Awareness is there. I experience the dreams. I'm able to see the dreams because I'm aware of it. I'm able to experience my deep sleep state as well. That is why the experience of bliss I had, Sukha Mahama Swam Nakinchit Avedisham. When I wake up in the morning, I say, I slept so well. I didn't know anything. So we kind of experience that darkness, that not knowing, and we experience that great rest we get in deep sleep. Now, I was there experiencing it, which is why I'm able to remember it the next morning. So my awareness of my experience in deep sleep was present. The awareness was present in my dream state, because that's how I saw the dreams. And the awareness is present now, which is how I'm aware of the world around me. What is common in all these three states is my awareness of it. The awareness always remains. It never, ever disappears. The same awareness remains with me through the three states. Even if I go to some Disloka, Chandraloka, Suryaloka, Brahmaloka, wherever I might go after I die, the awareness will remain there as well. In yuga after yuga, in cycles of creation after cycles of creation, this awareness will remain. It never, ever disappears. And therefore, the conclusion that Vedanta teachers come to is that the only entity, the only reality is this awareness, because it never, ever disappears. We read in the Upanishad. So one of the questions that can come is, well, what is this awareness? Who is this awareness? The simple word that gets often used in Vedanta is, it's the Atman. It's me. It's the real me. So simple. Who is perceiving all this? Me. The experiencer is the me. But there's this beautiful passage in the Kathopanishad we read, Atmendriya mano yuktam bhokta iti ahur manishinaha, which means the Atman is called the perceiver when it is associated with the body, the mind, and the senses. Now the Atman is real. Atman is consciousness, prajnanam brahma. Atman is pure consciousness. Again, I want to say something about the word pure. The word consciousness, it's so much used and overused today. Even people who want to kind of try to bring the connection between science and spirituality and so on. But I think the word consciousness gets a little bit overused, and therefore there is a chance to misunderstand what is the intended meaning. Normally, when we use the word consciousness, we always imply an object. I'm conscious of the tree, means I'm seeing the tree, I have knowledge that it's a tree. I'm conscious of this, I'm conscious of that. So consciousness seems to require an object. I have to be conscious of something. So when we usually use the word conscious or consciousness, there is an implication of that there is some object I'm conscious of. So pure consciousness, in contrast, would mean consciousness itself. Yes, if there is an object, the consciousness will reveal that object. I will have knowledge of that object. The object depends on consciousness for it to be revealed. But consciousness itself does not depend on any object. It can be by itself. I mean, one rather simple example would be that on our planet, in our solar system, we get light from the sun. And we depend on the sun for light. Well, at night nowadays, we have electricity and all of that. But still, most of the day, the whole Earth and the whole planet will just cool down and we'll all just die if the sun weren't there. So we depend on the sun. We depend on the sun's light, sun's heat, everything. Not so much now, and there is so much heat now. We might say, well, it would have been better if the sun had been a little bit further away. Nevertheless, it's in sun's light during the daytime that we are able to see things. The sun doesn't depend on anything for its light to shine. So think about it. Even if the entire earth disappeared, the sun can still shine because the light doesn't depend on the object. So that's what is meant by pure consciousness. That yes, if there is a tree, I'm conscious of the tree. If there is a dog, I'm conscious of the dog. But consciousness itself, without any object, that is who the Atman is. It's interesting that we speak about light. We cannot see light. We can only see the objects illumined by light. Light itself is not seen. Consciousness sometimes becomes a little bit like that. We become aware of consciousness in our present state only because we are conscious of objects. Now, what we need is to turn our senses back inward so that we can go to the source and experience the consciousness itself. The Kathopanishad has this beautiful verse, Paranchikhani Vyatranat Swayambhu. The senses that were all made going outward. And therefore we don't have to make any effort. I just have to open my eyes and I see the objects effortlessly. Now, if I can turn this power of the senses inward, the power of the mind, which is continually going out, turn it inward, then I have some hope of finding or getting in touch with consciousness itself. Then I become aware of the consciousness, not as an object of my perception, but as a subject, that I am that consciousness. So I'm the light which illumines the whole world. I'm the consciousness which makes the world exist for me, or makes the world appear as if it exists for me. The body, the mind, and the senses, which is how most people are identified with today, they are dependent on, they are not independent. Clearly, we know that the Atman is real, of course, that's pure consciousness. But when we lose touch with the body, when we stop being aware of the body, that's what the sleep state is. I mean, what is sleep? That you have your dinner, you go to your bed and switch off the light. For some time, we are turning and twisting in our bed. We are aware of where we are. We are aware of the body. We know who we are. And suddenly, some kind of a veil seems to come over us. We never know how, we never know when, but it does happen. That's how we fall asleep. And sleep simply means I no longer know where I am. I no longer know who I am. And so when I lose the awareness of the body, and that can happen even when people fall unconscious, but when I lose awareness of the body, then that is what sleep becomes. When I lose awareness of both my body and mind, then that is deep sleep. So when I lose awareness of my body, the mind is still active. And it's that activity of the mind which shows up as dreams. Now, when both my body and mind become inactive, or at least I become unaware of their existence, then that's when deep sleep occurs. And because the body and mind, they don't last, they don't continue, they don't persist the way awareness does, that is why we say they're not really real. Or we could put it the other way. The world that we experience is as real as the body, or as the world that we experience as unreal as the body. You could say either way. The dreams that we experience is again as real as the mind. So it's a very provisional reality, each depending on the other. Something similar can be said about Ishvara also, about the personal God. And that's the kind of a question sometimes people have in Advaitic thinking, that there is this complete denial of of God. I mean, people who rather half-baked knowledge of non-duality would just say, oh, it's all, I mean, it's kind of easy to say, oh, it's all Brahman, it's all one. But saying it itself, I don't know, it probably might have some benefit, but if thinking about oneness, and if somehow doesn't show itself in my day-to-day activities, it doesn't manifest through the way I think, through the way I talk, through the way I do my work, through the way I relate to other people, then just thinking of that oneness at one level, not much value. Sri Ramakrishna, who was a guru of Swami Vivekananda, he used to say that the vultures fly high up in the sky, but all the time they're just looking at some piece of rotten flesh or some dead animal, and they would all kind of swoop down below to go and then eat it. So sometimes we have to be careful that our lives don't become like that, that an intellectual stimulation as a result of reading this non-dualistic texts, even if we have sharp intellects to be able to understand and appreciate this thought, intellectually we might be flying high up at a higher altitude, but that may not have any direct relationship with our day-to-day lives. And that's a great tragedy. That's how our life can get divided. We speak about oneness, but our life already gets divided into this intellectual flights of philosophy and this mundane, materialistic living. Now that division, unless that division is not removed, we haven't really grounded ourselves in the ideal of oneness. Sri Ramakrishna used to say that to make our life authentic, what we think, what we say, and what we do must be in complete harmony with one another. All of the tension that many of us experience in life is because these three things go in three different directions. We think in one way. Oftentimes what we say doesn't match with what we think. And then what we do doesn't match with what we think or say. It's almost like if I'm tied with a rope and pulled in three different directions, of course there's going to be pain. Of course I'm going to be stressed. Of course there's going to be tension. But if my thinking, my speaking, my working, if all of these are in harmony, they all go in the same direction, then that constitutes an authentic life. So who is a non-dualist? A non-dualist is not someone who simply likes the non-dualistic way of thinking, who doesn't simply enjoy reading non-dualistic books. A non-dualistic person is one who not only accepts the ideal of non-dualism, but makes a sincere effort to live according to the implications of that non-dual reality. And that is very important. So I wanted to say something about the personal God. And it is this. Think about it this way. We know that when we go to sleep, suppose someone is just living by themselves, all by themselves. You go to sleep, you are just one person at home. And then when you dream, in that dream, a whole world opens out before you. There are people, there are animals, there are mountains, there are rivers. But the reality is there is this one person who is asleep. And this whole dream world is a creation of this person who is asleep. So in some ways, every night when we dream, we are creators of our own dream. Now, just think about this scenario. What if Brahman went to sleep? Now we might say, well, that's ridiculous because Brahman is pure consciousness. Speaking about Brahman going to sleep is almost like saying that consciousness becoming unconscious, which is impossible. The only way impossible things become possible is if they really are not possible, but they feel as if they are possible, such as in dream. Everything that happens in dream, impossible things happen in dream, but we are able to accept it because we know dreams are not real. In the same way, if Brahman were to go to sleep, what would happen? We have to say, well, if Brahman goes to sleep, Brahman would start dreaming. And it's possible to see this entire Srishti as a dream of Brahman. Now, oftentimes what happens in our dreams is that when I go to sleep and I dream, everyone in my dream is created by me. I'm the creator. But among all these people that I see in my dream, I just focus on one person and say, that's me. And then whatever that me in my dream does, next morning I'd say, oh, last night I dreamt, I did this, I did that, I met someone, and so on. So although I was the entire creator of the whole dream, I narrowed myself down. I limited myself to just one person in that dream and said, that's me. Now, from our own experience, it may be possible to say that's probably what could happen. If Brahman fell asleep and Brahma start dreaming, then there is one person in Brahman's dream who Brahma will say, that's me. The me, the idea of me that every one of us feels in our heart is the me being experienced by Brahman who is asleep. This is very important to remember. Now, in the dream, I have become this limited me, this little mortal human being. And of course, I look at this whole Srishti and a doubt comes to my mind, how did all this come? Someone must have made it. And that's how the idea of the personal God, the Saguna Ishvara comes in, that we all have come from this one infinite being. Our whole being rests in that one being, and unto whom we all return in the end. So this Saguna Ishvara is as real as this Jiva who is worshipping it, adoring it, praying to it, is as real as this world that I see. So it would be a mistake for non-dualists to think that the Saguna Ishvara is a creation of my mind. No, it's not a creation of my mind. If it's a creation of my mind, only I would see it. No, but there are other people in this big cosmic dream. They are also sensing the presence of this Ishvara. So the Ishvara is not a product of my imagination. Ishvara is real as I am in my present state. Yes, but the Ishvara, the Saguna, is a product of the imagination or the dream of Brahman who is asleep. But not just Ishvara, all of us in our present state, this whole multiplicity, this diversity is the dream of the sleeping Brahman. Now, I will just conclude by mentioning one thing, that years ago when I was studying Vedanta under a great Pandit in Chennai, his name was Sri Varahur Kalyanasundar Shastrigal. So this was the question I asked him. I said, yes, the world is a dream, and if we wake up, the dream will vanish. But whose dream is it? Because only if it is my dream, then I can wake up and the dream would go. What if it is someone else's dream? And then I have no control over it. That person has to wake up in order for the dream to go. And then he appreciated that question. And he said, we all have to go with the idea, this is my dream. Because ultimately, as I said, it's Brahman's dream, and every one of us is Brahman. That's the meaning of Tattvamasi. And this Anubhava Vakya, Anubhuti, is Aham Brahmasmi. So through practice, through study, through prayer, through worship, whatever works, through any of these spiritual disciplines, through Shravana, Manana, Nididhyasana, no one should be fanatic enough to say, this is the only way to do it. We don't know. People are different. Different things might work for different people. So long as we are sincere, so long as we are earnest, help will come. That's what we say is grace. That I have to be honest, I have to be authentic, I have to hold on to these principles. I should not compromise with anything, that I should not follow anything blindly. And then the right path will open out before me. And then I will know what is the truth, what is the real. And whatever works for me, ultimately, if I hold on to these basic principles, I will know, not just intellectually, but I will experience the truth of non-duality, the truth of Advaita. Then I will know that that is the only reality. And that reality is me. So rather than thinking that we are going from ignorance to truth, it might be helpful to think in terms of we're going from truth to truth. That is what Swami Vivekananda said, that our journey is from truth to truth, a truth that is lower to truth that is higher. Progressively, we go. As we go higher up, we recognize that what seemed real at an earlier stage is no longer real. And that's how we evolve, that's how we progress until we realize that we were always free. That all this terrible dream of bondage, this terrible dream of being just mortal human creatures, or just any creatures with a body and mind, was such a limitation. And then we can just be happy and just be who we are. So one of the great disciples of Sri Ramakrishna, his name was Swami Shivanandaji. We call him Mahapurush Maharaj. He said once, what's this big deal about self-realization? We just become what we already are. And that's the tragedy. It's so easy to become somebody else. It's so difficult to become our own true selves. That's the challenge. So my prayers to Bhagavadpada Sri Shankara, that through his infinite grace, through his teachings, that may we all attain to that one ideal, that ideal of oneness, ideal of universality, that we may recognize that truth dwelling in our heart and then become sources of joy, not only to ourselves, but joy, peace, and harmony to everyone around us as well. Om Jananim Saradam Devim Ramakrishnam Jagadgurum Padapadme Tayo Shritva Pranamami Muhur Muhuhu. So I'll be happy to take some questions now.
Thank you, Swamiji, for sharing your thoughts. So thank you so much. So you explained various things. You explained the 5 kinds of dreams, and you told the real world, the living world is almost not truth, same as the dream state. So both are same. Dreams is waking state, both are similarly not same, not unreal. So you explained well. And here we have one inquiry. So you told you have given the example of light. So light helps us to see the objects. See, in absence of light, the objects are still there but not seen. So light can be considered as a faculty which helps to see the objects. So, but both light and objects are real. So can I say awareness is a faculty which is real, which helps us to experience the world, which is also real?
As I said, it just depends on what our definition of reality is. And one way reality gets defined in Advaita is that if something is real, it is necessarily eternal. Because the only reason we are able to dismiss dreams as not real is because they don't last. Compared to dreams, the waking world seems to have a greater persistence, and therefore we say the world is real while the dreams are not. And that's why we cannot say that the world is real as the awareness itself, that the world depends on awareness to affirm its reality. And therefore, if something is real, it's also independent. And because the objective world is not independent in that sense, it cannot be said to be absolutely real the way pure consciousness is.
So I have a question. So how one can realize the real thing? Because we never see that this is unreal. So, but a common man, how can realize there is a real thing? I should know that. So, how can he?
Yeah, good question. One of the things is that simply saying mechanically the world is not real doesn't help. What we need is, if we are able to sense something which is more real, then that which was real at earlier stage automatically loses its reality. As I said, when we were dreaming, in the dream, it appears very real. We are able to dismiss dreams as unreal only when we wake up and feel this is the reality. So we could say at one level that the waking experience has a higher reality than the dream experience. That's our present thinking. That's why we say this world is real and the dream is not. So if we accept gradations of reality, that if the waking world is somehow more real than the dream world, then we have got to accept, at least theoretically, the possibility that something could be more real than the waking experience. And that's how we speak about pratibhasika satta, vyavaharika satta, and absolute truth. And so therefore, the best way to go about is to find something which is higher, something which is deeper. And therefore, for non-dualists also, Advaitins also, to have respect for people who are Advaitins. Because sometimes the history has been pretty, sometimes people have been pretty brutal in just running down upon other ways of thinking. And what we see in some of these enlightened teachers, we see, for instance, in the teachings of Sri Ramakrishna, Sharda Devi, Swami Vivekananda, the tradition I come from, that they did not condemn anybody. They did not look down upon anybody. What Swami Vivekananda said is that at different stages of our own personal evolution, all of these ideals, which some might look down upon like lower ideals, none of these are lower, because at a certain stage of evolution, those ideals can be very helpful. And when I evolve, some other ideals will come to me and those earlier ideals will fall off. It's like the toys I played with when I was a little baby. They were very precious to me at that age. But when I grew up, I needed something else. And so the older toys, the older points of interest fell off. Exactly in the same way, at every stage of our spiritual evolution, if at my present stage, if thinking of God as some extra cosmic being and praying to that God with great devotion helps me, go for it. Don't worry about non-duality. But when my heart gets filled with that devotion, through ultimately, the ultimate reality is same. The same reality is appearing in a dualistic way to a certain person. The same reality is appearing in a Vishishtadvaitic way to some person, and the same reality is appearing in an Advaita way to some person. The reality is not different. So when the right time comes, when my clarity of my mind increases, when I become what the Kathopanishad says, Sukshmadarshi, when I'm able to see the Sukshma things, then the higher and higher ideals. So as I evolve, my understanding of the supreme reality also evolves. And that's what we should strive to do, to find where we are right now and strive to go at an ideal higher, something that I learn, something that can make me grow.
And one more question. So awareness is the real thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the is more awareness in the waking state than the sleeping state. But we say why should we say that awareness is more experienced in the sleeping state? Especially in the waking state, we say I am aware, I am listening, I am doing, I am talking. So I'm more aware. But in the sleeping state, I am unaware of all the things. I don't experience the awareness. But
no, actually,
say that?
No, yeah, it's a good question. It's like this. In deep sleep state, we know that awareness exists because next morning when we wake up, we are able to narrate our experience, what we experienced in deep sleep. And what we really experience is there is no world there. Therefore, there is no world to experience. But we did experience nothing. Now, even to experience nothing, the darkness, which is really means ignorance, I knew. That's why when I wake up in the morning, I say, I didn't know anything at all. And I experienced joy. So the memory of my experience in Sushupti shows that awareness was present. And now the presence of awareness becomes a little bit more apparent in deep sleep because there is nothing else to distract me. Now, in the waking state, there are hundreds and things around me, sound, smell, touch. There's such a lot going on that my whole being is kind of gets absorbed into the objective world. So it's relatively difficult to think about awareness because it has become so much a part of our experience every moment. But in deep sleep, because of the absence of the objective world, it becomes a little bit easier to at least conceptualize the presence of awareness in that state.
So I'm checking, is there any query? Okay, thank you, Swamiji. We will conclude the session here. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And here, we have another session in the morning at 8 o'clock. The morning session will be from 7 to 8:30. Sorry, from 7 to 8:30. Talk will be given by Swami Brahma Prakashananda. That the topic on the doctrine of Alata Shanti in Gaudapada Acharya's Mandukya Karika. So we will meet again in tomorrow's session. So all of you, thank you, and thank you for participation, and thank you, Swamiji, once again.